Hello and welcome to another episode of Shield Wolf's Game Review, where I review strategy and RPG games that are typically vintage and out of print, but not always. As always, for the YouTube algorithm, please like, share, subscribe, and drop a comment in the space provided below. If you have anything that you'd like to add in terms of links or information that might be appropriate, please provide that information in your comment, and if I think it works, I will also put that in the description so people could link out to it. Typically, I'm going to be using images from my own collection, so this probably won't even apply, but I'm going to put it up there anyway, just in case. This episode is going to be about Runequest, 3rd edition. This is the deluxe box, or deluxe edition, sometimes it's called, and that's really because they included both the Game Master and player's manuals in this box. Later, they actually separated this out into two separate box sets, one for the Game Master and the other one for the player. But this one includes all of those documents. A little tiny bit of history on the game Runequest is that this 3rd edition is the first time that Avalon Hill published it. Prior to that, it was published by Chaosium. And a guy named Ian over at the Willy Muffin channel on YouTube does an amazing job of the history, the full history of Runequest. I'll link that in the description below. This video, I will get into the contents of the box and a little bit of the game mechanic as well. Maybe some of the principal differences between that and 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons, which this is kind of similar to. This box set came out in 1984 and was one of the thicker, more densely populated box sets you could buy at the time for fantasy role-playing. And it's really well made. It has a nice history. It goes back into the 70s as far as the 1st and 2nd edition of the game. This Avalon Hill version is really super excellent, I think. On the bottom right-hand side of the box, you can see that Avalon Hill is stating that they own the copyright to the name Runequest. So they purchased it and they own it. At the point of 1984, they acquired it from Chaosium. So it's not like they're publishing it for Chaosium. They actually owned it at that time. Here's an image of the side of the box. It gives you some idea of how thick the box is. It's over 2 inches tall. It's 2 1/8 inches tall with just about 2 inches of internal box height. And it uses almost all of it. So it's pretty well stocked inside there, and we'll get into that in a minute. This game does come with dice. It comes with 2 20-sided dice, 1 8-sided, and 3 6-sided dice. The 3 6-sided dice you see there are not the originals. I have no idea what I did with them. I believe the 20-sided and 8-sided are original, but it's been so long since I purchased the set. I purchased it in 1984. I couldn't tell you if those are the original dice or not. I think they are, as far as the 20 and 8-sided. I like it when you buy a box set and it tells you what's supposed to be in it. Not all of them do, but this one does. This includes 5 books and some other stuff. I'll get into that right now. It includes the player's book, which has a red cover, a magic book, which also has a red cover, the Game Master's book, which has a gray cover, the Creature's book, which has a gray cover, and the Glorantha book, which has a gray cover. Where the Glorantha book description is, it tells you that this game setting is made for use in Glorantha and that you can use it, but it also says that it provides a fantasy Europe map for the box set, which I thought was kind of a cool idea. If you're not going to reproduce the Glorantha map, which doesn't make any sense, why not include a new map to play on? And you can always use it as an extension of the Glorantha map if you wanted to, or any other fantasy role-playing game. The box set also includes the player's notes, which does not have a cover. It includes the game aids, which also do not have a cover, and we'll take a look at those in a minute. Of course, it includes the map, which I will show you, and then it includes the dice, which I just talked about. What's in this box is actually a pamphlet. And if you open it up to the first page, that's what it looks like. and you have an adventurer sheet there and an explanation of some of the, map information and how to read the maps. And this is the booklet called Player's Notes, which on the front is listed. And there's a little section on Player's Notes. It tells you how to understand the experience system, some of the character generation information. In fact, you can generate a character off of the Player's Notes and be pretty much good to go. There's even a cool place where it tells you how to convert characters from earlier editions of Runequest into 3rd edition, which I thought was pretty helpful. And it gets into things like battle magic and your skills and a bunch of different samples of, examples of how to play the game. It gives you a sample of play to include, like what the game master would say and a guy named Charlie and some other people. And it really walks you through the mechanics of the game. I'm going to get into the characteristics, which are, you would understand the ability scores if you're steeped in D&D tradition. And they have things like strength, constitution, size, intelligence, power, dexterity, and appearance. I'll explain those in a little bit. Another nice, helpful set of guidance here is the tactician's work list included in the player's notes on the first page. And this goes into like just good teamwork, like don't create characters that are too powerful. Organize your stuff so that when it's your turn, you don't hold up the game, and just, good gaming etiquette. And I found that there are some gamers out here who could really benefit from reading this. Also, some of these things you can see have translated into things like World of Warcraft, where it says ignore loot until the objective is achieved. So, yeah, cool stuff. This is a great little game. With all of the attributes of your characters like magic and skills, it explains all throughout how to convert these different things from 1st and 2nd edition to 3rd edition, which again I think is really helpful because that allows you to use your 1st and 2nd edition supplements and maybe adventure modules with the 3rd edition. I included a shot of the character generation summary from the player's notes so you get an idea of how they table out things. And they do a lot of this, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. It's the same format for pretty much all the data, and it's helpful because the way they set it up, it's organized in a logical way, and it's easy to reference. Here's a shot of the character conversion from the player's notes I referenced earlier. Thought you might want to take a look at that. The map is one-sided, but it's really large. This is how it fits in the box. But it is basically 8 panels this size, so 8.5 by 11 panels all in one fold-out. I just call it an 8-fold, but you'll see what I mean in a second. Now keep in mind that this was published in '84, and this map really does use a very similar color code to the Greyhawk map. And although it doesn't have a hexagonal overlay, or it doesn't have really any way of delineated locations in terms of hexes or squares, it's still a pretty nice looking map. The one drawback being it doesn't have a scale of miles on it. Now it's Europe, so you really don't need to have it, I suppose. You could figure it out for yourself. But it would have been helpful to have a scale of miles on there. The one kind of weird thing about this one, now keep in mind that this is a copyright to Avalon Hill, the whole box set is, but this map is copywritten to Chaosium still, and it might just be that they bought the maps from Chaosium and included them in the box set. That's what I think happened there. The map's fairly large. It's 31 inches from left to right, and just shy of 22 inches tall. This is book 1 of 5. This is the 84-page Player's Handbook, which has everything you need to create a character except for the conversion data found in the player's notes. This also has, all of the weapons and skills and player character classes and races and so forth. So this is, you would need this to build anything other than a converted character. when you read this book, you're going to see where Wizards of the Coast got a lot of the information that they used in D20. There's a lot of stuff that was definitely lifted from this game. You know, sleight of hand and some of the other perception skills and sort of those sort of things. These were all clearly lifted, in my opinion, from this game system by Wizards of the Coast for their D20. And it's okay because D20 is a really good product, but they definitely, you know, took liberally from this game system, and it's really evident when you read it. There's an abbreviated table of contents in the front fly page, but then on the back there's an in-depth table of contents, which is a little bit easier to navigate actually. And this is the table of contents on the back. It even says complete contents. It has a big breakdown of all the major subject matter you would need to know in the creation of your character. One of the cool things they did here that you can see both D20 and Pathfinder borrowed liberally from later is the idea that every class could have subclasses. In here you see things like Priest Barbarian or Fisher Barbarian, Initiate Barbarian, and again, this is 1984. They were the first ones to really do this in a codified way. I think that's pretty cool. The other thing that this game system does is it basically has I guess you could look at it as like sort of an etiquette thing, but basically it's a level of civilization that your character has as an origin. Like, do they come from a primitive origins? Are they a nomadic type? Are they civilized? There's another one I forgot. But this also alters how their ability scores and abilities in general are conducted based on their origins, which I thought was kind of cool. And it's another thing, when you look at the background of the characters in 5e, this is where they got it from. This is Book 2, the Magic Book, and it explains the magic system in Runequest and also explains the magic using classes a little bit more in depth, as well as the various spells. Now, all characters, this is an interesting part about Runequest, is that all characters have some magical ability, or potentially have some magical ability based on their power rating, and that is a die roll. Now, specific classes that use magical spells like shamans and priests and so forth, they have a deeper understanding of these powers and can use them to a higher extent. Additionally, this magical power, which is basically a life force similar to that which you would find in the earlier understandings of Star Wars, like the Force, so to speak, being attached to, in this case, not like Star Wars, but in this case, living things. Now, in their magical understanding in Runequest, things like undead or inanimate objects like rocks and chairs and things, they do not have any life force, but can be manipulated by this magical life force. And there are 3 different perspectives broken down by 3 classes. And there's the shaman, the priestess, and the sorcerer's answers, it's called. And these are their perspectives on this use of force, its origins, and how they understand it to work, which I think is kind of a cool and interesting concept. Heavily tied into magic are the planes of existence, and they are explained also in this book. In the Runequest magical system, there are also attributes to every spell, which include intensity, ritual, the spell itself, and the total magic points required to use that spell, and the total magic points of the caster. Additionally, there are types of spells, and they are broken down by active, passive, ritual, stackable or non-stackable, variable or non-variable. And these are different attributes of the way spells are used, and not terribly unlike what we use in other systems, but actually broken down a little bit more. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds on that because that's probably a whole nother video. But just understand it's a pretty well developed magical system in this game. And the book itself goes into great depth about these differences and the spells in Runequest. Like all of the books in this set, there's a really good complete table of contents on the back. And here's that complete table of contents. I really like the way this one works, especially in this book. It's very quick and easy to navigate. I included this page because I thought there might be some questions about ritual magic, so you can pause this and read it for yourself if you like. And then there's also the ritual of magic, which is not necessarily the same thing as ritual magic. The ritual of magic is the ritual that you perform while you're casting, and every spell has that. But then, of course, there's also just, in general, ritual magic. A little tiny bit confusing. Maybe the only thing confusing about that system, potentially, would be that until you got used to using it. This helps you understand the use of power points versus spells in terms of its cost. These special divine spells and common divine spells are listed by name, and then the amount of points that they cost to cast. And then some of them are also ritual, which do not cost points in a traditional sense. And that goes back to the ritual page, which I just showed you. This is the Game Master's Book, Book 3, and it's essentially a DM's guide. It is not like the Dungeons & Dragons DM's guide in terms of it being super thick, because a lot of the information is broken down in some of the other books, but also the DM doesn't have to work quite as hard in Runequest as he would, say, in a Dungeons & Dragons environment, because a lot of the gameplay is handled by the mechanic. So once you have a scenario, you can really spend a lot of your time just basically monitoring rolls and providing the scenario to the players. Another reason why the Game Master's Book is not that large, it's actually only 37 pages of Game Master rules, and then there's actually a scenario at the end of it, an introductory scenario. I'll get to that in a minute. But they have a lot of tables in here, so a lot of what the DM is going to have to sort through has been, solved essentially by a lot of tables, similar to first edition Dungeons & Dragons, not surprisingly. The table of contents, of course, is again on the back. Again, it's very easy to use. And the money tree, which is an introductory scenario, is the last few pages in this book. So you can jump right into a game with nothing more than the deluxe box. The book on creatures does fully describe 94 creatures, but if I was to point out a weak point in this box set, it would be this book, because a lot of the creatures are not super fanciful. And this is basically a high fantasy game in terms of its magic, but the animals are sort of either, mythological cryptids or actual animals, even if there's some of them are super fauna. There are some, high fantasy creatures here, and there are definitely books that you can get that are supplements to the game that have more monsters in them. But again, if I was going to point out a slight weak point, that would be it. That being said, what I do like about this is that they give a historical, when applicable, they give a historical reference for the creature, and then they, of course, give you its stats and its abilities and so forth. And they do so in a really succinct way. You don't have to do a lot of extraneous reading, and you can incorporate these creatures into your game pretty quickly. Of course, the obligatory complete contents list there, showing the 94 creatures. If you want to get a look at the names of them, you'll probably recognize most of them and understand why. I feel as though maybe they could have gone a little deeper in on the monsters in this particular set. Book number 5 is the Glorantha book, which is an explanation of the map that they do not really include. But thankfully, most of it is useful information, and it does include a lot of the historical information for the world, which of course would translate over to the map that you do have, and also gets into a lot of other entities within the Runequest system, like gods and demigods and heroes and various races that are important. So in that sense, it's really useful, and I think that you'll find that this book helps to kind of fill in some of the weaknesses for book 4. It's also got a fair amount of tables that show various important information for some of the races and also for some of the random determinations you'll be making during the game. This is definitely more of a game master's book as well. Hence the color being gray, by the way. Here's some of the Glorantha information again, and I thought you might want to take a look at it so you could pause it here and read if you wanted to. Here's some more information about some of the entities you're going to find within the Glorantha world. Again, I thought you might want to take a read at that. And here's the complete contents again. Just reading the headings, you get an idea of the information that's in there. Because this is an Avalon Hill game, they include all kinds of stuff in here in their pamphlet. This is a pamphlet with 16 pages that goes into a bunch of stuff you could order, products that they have, things that they're going to be introducing, and other information that's pertinent to Avalon Hill products. I picked a page here to open up to so you can look at what's inside, get an idea of what that looks like. Here's another shot inside of the Avalon Hill pamphlet. And the back cover is basically some contact information and an example of the order sheet you would fill out if you want to buy one of their products or some of their products. This is an Avalon Hill Victory Games registration card. It's basically a postcard. Obviously, you affix a stamp on the front here. On this side of the registration card, you would fill out the pertinent information about the product that you bought. You also could provide feedback about that product, which is interesting because these game companies at this time not only had to develop a direct relationship with their customers for product improvement information and for game returns and warranties and that sort of thing, but also they really use this information to improve their games because they had to self-publish. Dungeons and Dragons and Runequest and Tunnels and Trolls, all these companies initially self-published because nobody would touch them. They had no idea how popular these games were going to be. And, in the early 80s, these companies were maintaining their own relationship with the end buyer, and this is how they did it. The last thing you're going to find in this box is the game aids. And this is basically a handout for primarily the Dungeon Master, but also for the players. And it has a huge number of tables on the pages labeled A through H. Here's an example of what you might find. And this also, these really densely populated tables, more put in for the way they would fit even more than the logical sequencing of them. So you had to kind of get used to where these things were located to use it quickly. And that concludes this explanation and deep dive into the Runequest Deluxe Edition 3rd Edition box set from Avalon Hill. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up, please subscribe, ring the bell, and drop a comment in the space provided below. It does help the YouTube algorithm, and I'd certainly appreciate it. Thank you very much.